Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. So both Marvel and DC put out movies this year about heroes fighting other heroes. It's a thing that I myself don't really get. I don't buy superhero books to see them punching each other. I want them battling evil or wrongdoers. Sure, internal struggles and character dynamics that force heroes onto opposite sides of an issue are great. Even a good brawl between them is one thing, but it kinda gets repetitive after a while, especially when you focus an entire event around the concept. Or several events. Or sequels to events because of a popular movie. There are ways of doing it in good fun, particularly when you're just waiting for the heroes to finally come together and fight a greater menace, but other times not so much, especially when it can come across like these are not adults capable of making logical, reasonable conclusions and just immediately resort to slamming each other through walls. But then who really wants to see a bunch of distinctive characters coming together to fight something evil? Oh look, I seem to have a movie DVD in my hand that's now for sale. But yeah, there are times when it's fun to see two heroes get into a good knockout brawl. And while I didn't like Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, the concept of the two fighting and then joining up because of their different personalities is something that feels extremely natural, especially when in the end they're supposed to realize the strengths of the other. World's Finest of the DC animated universe is a great example of how to pull it off in my humble opinion, and I feel Captain America: Civil War is one of the best superhero movies ever made. But these films were not the first attempt at making a feature film with different superhero characters fighting one another. From what I can tell, in the early 1970s, literary agent David Obst, who was not only the agent of Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, but had his hand in a number of movie productions, suggested to Stan Lee and Carmine Infantino that there should be a film crossover between Spider-Man and Superman. However, because the Christopher Reeves Superman film was already being developed at Warner Brothers, and Spidey was getting a TV show at the time, the two companies just decided, why not, and produced a comic crossover. Don't you love it when major milestones in comic book history, like, say, the first superhero crossover between Marvel and DC, are done just for the hell of it? We need that level of friendliness again, not the two desperately having a pissing match with each other. My controversial thing is more controversial than yours. But yes, the first Marvel and DC crossover. Not the first collaboration, mind you. The two worked together on, of all things, an adaptation of The Wizard of Oz, but a full-on crossover between characters from their respective universes. And they decided to hype it up a bunch, with a huge book, in more ways than one. Hey, you know what would be really funny? If I didn't actually do any research on this before deciding to do it and just assumed it would be 40 pages at most and not the 92 that it is, a nice 92 pages after I just did a huge review? Yeah, that'd be pretty stupid. Surprise, I'm pretty stupid. I also assumed I'd be able to easily get a copy, but I cannot. This thing is actually pretty damn expensive. The cheapest I could find it on eBay at the time, even counting reprints, was $45, with most original copies being over $100. So screw it, not worrying about that. But there was another way it was big. Namely, it was printed in something called Treasury format. Treasury format books are huge, basically an oversized novelty book, the kind of thing you'd make if you wanted to do an effects shot where someone is shrinking. The 70s saw a lot of books printed in Treasury format in the hopes that the small additional cost of production but higher price would mean larger profit margins. For example, this Superman and Fantastic Four crossover printed in 1999 is Treasury format. It's bigger than my Buffy Season 9 trades. I can't fit it on my normal shelves. Interestingly, that is the only thing this book has in common with Holy Terror. Treasury format books had their high point in the 70s, but died off for a number of reasons. Still, I applaud the fact that they saw how big an event the first Marvel and DC crossover was, and as such wanted to make it as big as it seemed. But yeah, with as rare and expensive as it is, that's why I don't have a physical copy to show off. But hey, I've got scans, so we've got the story. So let's dig into Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man and see which Twitter team hashtag wins out between them.
Welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Linkara's gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. Brodsky, you're not the smartest. Life out, you're not an artist. Anyone who's had a bad comic published
Sling us a web tonight, 'cause we're all in the mood for a hero.
Okay, I tell a slight lie about the scans. The ones I have are from a 1995 reprint of the comic, which has a cover with altered colors, namely that the city is now in black and white. I didn't even get the point of it. At best, it makes Soups and Spidey pop out more, yet they left in a big green squiggly line across the coastline. Why is that colored when nothing else is? Now it's radioactive! That can't be good! Also, I know it's just that they're using the respective characters' logos, but it kinda paints things a bit one-sided when Superman is just Superman, while Spidey is the amazing Spider-Man. Superman! He's not amazing! The Battle of the Century! Screw you, Battle of Britain! Up yours, Normandy Invasion! The greatest superhero team-up of all time! Admission by Marvel and DC that all of their crossover event comics after this are all downhill from here. Yes, the greatest superhero team-up of all time. Which is why they have verses in the title. But yeah, this cover is up there among the most homaged and spoofed, although personally I always found the perspective a bit wonky, especially in regards to Spidey's placement on the tower. The black and white artwork for the city doesn't help either, since now it looks like Spider-Man is attached to it with his butt. After a standard splash page that's pretty much the cover but from a better perspective, and shows us that Spidey is actually balancing himself one-footed on the story title, we open with the first of 3 prologues, where a giant robot is smashing through Metropolis. And you people keep asking how Neutro's going to show up when he was only in one comic. See? Robot who doesn't know the difference between right and wrong right there. Winter in Metropolis. For some of the city's inhabitants, winter is a time of migration to happier climes, where the sun burns a trifle more brightly, and the air is less bitter and chill. For some, yes. For others, it is a time of screaming and car accidents from the icy pavement. Also, despite that narration, not a bit of evidence in this comic that it takes place during winter. Everyone dresses for spring. Well, either that or global warming has hit the DC universe in a big way. Anyway, Superman is of course flying over to deal with the robot. If it isn't one thing, it's another. There's always some new crackpot with an invention to destroy the world, and they always test it out on Metropolis. Seriously, Gotham is just right there, and Batman is infinitely more squishable than I am. Why do they think doing this in my town makes sense? A voice from the robot proclaims that they've already achieved their victory, and killing Superman will just be an added bonus. It flings him into a building, causing some rubble to fall down towards the citizens of Metropolis. Fortunately, Superman is able to save them, and while normally I'd make a Man of Steel joke or something about this, I'm just more curious why the bystanders haven't run in terror from this thing. It's gone through several buildings at this point, and superhero fights are common. Run for your lives! An inertia blast from the robot sends Soups flying through several buildings. Can't stop my momentum! I'm flying out of control! You know, when you stop and think about it, superhero fights operate on ragdoll physics. The robot arrives at Star Labs and rips open the roof, going to all the trouble of stealing a small computer console, which, given this is the 70s, means small was probably the size of a sofa chair, and tossing it inside its mouth. And disposes of the device in a manner which, while fitting, is also vaguely unsettling. Ew, chew with your mouth closed, robot! So really this robot is just that guy from a fruit pie comic that kept talking about computer chips. Not where I expected this crossover to go, but he was a Spider-Man villain, so I guess it counts. Although, given the computer connection, this could very well be the next evolution of Printout Man, too. In actual physics, giant robots like this don't really work, and the comic actually bothers to remember that, so it's using some kind of gravity beam to keep itself moving. Soups applies a harsher amount of pressure to counteract the beam and shoves the robot into the ground, but its head detaches and flies off. However, we soon learn that the head is a distraction, allowing for Lex Luthor, who is inside the body of the robot, to get away on a jetpack. Ah, Superman, you do disappoint me. Even a child could have seen that flying head was a mere decoy. It's a good thing you don't have enhanced hearing and speed, or else me yelling this out would mean you could come and stop me again. Superman returns to the Daily Planet, the Galaxy Communications Building. Yeah, quick explanation there. In the 70s, before reboots were a common thing, there was an attempt to streamline the DC universe and remove some of its goofier elements. The cornerstone of it all was Superman, in a storyline called the Sandman Saga. No, not that Sandman. No, not that one either, though with the Spider-Man crossover, I can see why you'd think that. But long story short, Superman would end up depowered a bit, all kryptonite on Earth would become inert, and Clark Kent would no longer be a buffoon as a cover. That and one other thing were the only things that lasted, namely that the Daily Planet was bought out by Galaxy Communications, and Clark became a TV reporter instead of a newspaper reporter. It was an attempt to modernize things a bit, which doesn't quite work these days since it would mean Clark Kent writing BuzzFeed articles called, "You won't believe these 15 people who are not Superman." After foiling a prank by the character Steve Lombard, introduced in the 70s as a comic relief character, the head of Galaxy Communications talks to the news team about their upcoming attendance of a World News Conference in New York. However, he's interrupted by the news report about the giant robot.
Wreaking havoc of the entire West Side. Most of the demolished buildings were empty.
Oh, so Luthor was attacking Angel Grove. And the news report says that the computer that was stolen was specifically designed for directing orbital satellites. Deciding to track where the robot came from, Superman heads to Metropolis Bay, where he finds an undersea lab that pulls him inside. Luthor reveals his plan to use specially designed lasers to blast Supes, but he manages to evade them well enough to destroy the control console. While Superman is temporarily blinded by the lasers, Luthor manages to get the satellite control chip away and sent to an alternate hideout. But Superman recovers fast enough to actually take Luthor into custody.
And so we bid a temporary farewell to the man known as Lex Luthor. We'll also bid farewell to Clark Kent as he hurries to join his friends aboard an evening flight to New York.
However, it's a United flight, so after the delays and cancellations, they should arrive just as the conference is ending. After a quick recap of who the hell Superman is, which probably should have come before the story, we move into the second prologue, where Spidey is surprisingly not swinging around, just kinda laying on top of a flagpole.
Winter in Manhattan. Like Metropolis, Manhattan has had a relatively snowless winter. And like Metropolis, Manhattan's winter has been cold and bitter.
Which is why no characters in this story are wearing coats, and Spidey feels perfectly comfortable resting his spandex-clad ass on a piece of metal at night. He spots some crooks robbing the Metropolitan Museum and swings in. This reveals to us that the crooks are General Patton.
You magnificent bastard, I read your book!
And no, they're not supposed to be army men or something, it's just they all happen to be wearing dark green jumpsuits and helmets. It's weird, even for hired goon attire. And yes, indeed, they are hired goons, working for Dr. Octopus, who shows up to confront Spidey. Look to the sky, Spider-Man! Sergeant Pepper and his Lonely Hearts Club band are making out with a girl group and singing Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds! It wasn't just an hallucination! No, it is his new vehicle, the Flying Octopus, aka the Hentitron 9000. I'll give it credit, it is a unique looking vehicle. Probably could have made a ton of money on however the hell you're making it float, Doc, but I'm not a scientist. Yeesh! And I thought the Spider-Mobile was a fiasco. Yeah, true story, there was a Spider-Mobile very briefly in comics, like an issue or two. Long story short, it was a publicity thing with a company creating a supposed pollution-free car, and Spidey accidentally drove it into a river. Unfortunately, the Flying Octopus proves to be a rather powerful tool since it knocks out Spidey in the ensuing brawl, and Dr. Octopus gets away. To continue Peter's good night, he brings the photos to the Daily Bugle to show to J. Jonah Jameson, who immediately orders the photos to be developed and the best slapped on the front page for a night edition, without ever bothering to look at them. And since the cameras were out of sync, the papers are sent out with a crappy close-up shot. J. Jonah Jameson writes a million editorials about how evil Spider-Man is, but can't be bothered to double-check his own newspaper before sending it out. Mary Jane shows up as Jameson throws Peter out, as if this was his fault, and he explains what happened to her. He also mentions the upcoming news convention, but when he spots an unusual-looking blimp in the sky, he ditches her and heads off to confront the blimp, thinking it's the Flying Octopus in disguise. Mary Jane probably won't speak to me for a week, since she did meet me at the Bugle so we could see a movie, but there are some things more important than Gone with the Wind. As God is my witness, I'll never go on a date again. Spidey leaps through the fake surface of the blimp, which would have been hilarious if he had been wrong and this was a real blimp. Would have gone right along with the night he was having, and lands on top of the flying octopus. The flying octopus ends up crashing, for some reason, into the Central Park Reservoir, allowing Spidey to beat him up and leave him for the cops. The prologue ends with Peter meeting up with MJ the next morning at the World News Conference, and she seems unusually happy to see him considering what happened. She's just been waiting since last night for Peter to apologize and try to win her back, so she can respond, "Frankly, Tiger, I don't give a damn." After a one-page explanation of Spidey for any newcomers, we enter the third and final prologue. Said prologues, including the bios, make up the first 38 pages of the book. Over a third of the thing is taken up by the prologues. Why not just make it part of the main story? Anyway, we cut to Deming, New Mexico, the site of a maximum security prison that's supposedly escape-proof, where supervillains are held awaiting trial. Dr. Octopus is already there as Lex Luthor is being walked in.
"You won't walk free this time, Luthor. Every cell has an automatic video monitor, complete with a sound pickup. When you use the toilet in your cell, we'll be able to hear everything. And the way you were searched back in the prison hospital, you couldn't carry a toothpick in here without someone knowing it. Never mind your usual arsenal."
Why do you even carry that many combs? What do you need them for?
"Face it, Luthor, we've got you, and we've got you good.
We're finally gonna nail you for stealing those 40 cakes, Luthor!" The two villains recognize one another, and of course point out their respective superhero nemesis screwing them over. Yeah, this is probably a good time to point out an oddity with the crossover. Most of the time, you expect crossovers like this to function around parallel universes. And several do, like Marvel vs. DC, JLA Avengers, but more times than not, they just pretend like the two inhabit the same universe, and have always inhabited the same universe. By their very nature, they're out of continuity anyway, aside from JLA Avengers, that's a story for another day, but it just feels kinda weird because when you think of the totality of some of these characters and the universes they inhabit, the idea that you've got, say, the Fantastic Four going up against Black Lanterns, or the Teen Titans aiding Spider-Man during the Clone Saga, it's just weird to think about how different the stuff would be simply by them being in the same world. Here, though, this is the 70s, before big crossover events, before there were hundreds of superheroes running around. It's just two supervillains meeting up and starting to plot and scheme together. On that note, Luthor proposes the two team up after they escape, although Dr. Octopus balks at the idea of them escaping. Luthor does indeed have a plan, though. While he was thoroughly searched, what they didn't find was a false layer of skin on his arm, hiding a very tiny amount of electronics that he quickly assembles into a sonic disruptor that knocks out the guards listening in on him, then uses a small power transmitter that will reactivate Dr. Octopus's robot appendages.
And that would have helped me escape if Dr. Octopus hadn't been here by... Well, look, I'll be honest, I just wanted to watch TV when they switched it off at night.
And so the third prologue ends with the two escaping together, with the hilarious image of Luthor getting a piggyback ride from Dr. Octopus.
"And all across the earth, even in their ignorance, people tremble just a bit tonight.
Yes, behold this terrifying image, everybody, and cower in fear." After a profile page on our villains, we begin Chapter 1, A Duel of Titans. Not the way I expected a remake of Clash of the Titans to go, but hey, I'm willing to give it a shot. So this is the World News Conference. So this is a thing that human beings don't actually say. It all seems rather confusing, Mr. Robertson. Where are the panels about prying into celebrities' personal lives, or the booth for pretending that something innocuous is newsworthy? Jameson wants Peter to do something for him, but Peter responds that he promised MJ they'd actually be taking a holiday while here. Jameson plays nice for a second, that a hard-working photographer needs a break now and then, but then spins it around to insult Peter and stating he isn't hardworking or the like. And frankly, after the crappy photos the night before, I'm not really all that shocked. Peter, however, has had enough of his dickishness. One minute you're Mr. Gladhand, the working boy's friend, the next, you put the knife in! And do you know how much stab wounds cost to treat on the pitiful salary you hand out? But yeah, he basically tells Jameson to blow it out his ass and storms off, with MJ close behind. You were so busy making a dramatic exit, you forgot your old friend, MJ. Yeah, he seems to be making a real habit of that lately, MJ. But nah, of course she forgives him. How can you hate anyone wearing that sweater? Meanwhile, Clark is talking with Lois about ComLab 1, an orbiting communications laboratory that NASA is going to launch. The mystery about it is that nobody seems to know what sort of experiments ComLab is actually going to be doing. Well, Clark, you know that April Fool's joke about recovering lost Doctor Who episodes thanks to transmissions beamed into space? Well, let's just say that somebody really wants to see a complete version of Marco Polo. After a thing that goes nowhere about Clark's boss, Morgan Edge, wanting to temporarily replace him as a newscaster with Walter Cronkite when the election season starts up, Lois goes to get some photos of the ComLab model. Something normally Jimmy Olsen would handle, but I guess he's too busy getting drunk with Ned Leeds or something. But since Lois Lane is the unluckiest human being in the universe, she trips over the scaffolding. Fortunately, she's saved by Peter, who was also after some shots of the thing. The two realize who the other is thanks to their own reputations in newspapers. Mary Jane comes over and Peter introduces Lois as Miss Lane. Miss? I guess you're not the liberated type, eh, Miss Lane? Some men like that sort of thing. Some men dig their women feminine. Right, Peter dear? What the hell? Yeah, this was apparently a second-wave feminism thing that's not really as big a deal anymore. The use of Miss, Ms., or Mrs. Basically, objection over the terminology for various reasons, mostly relating around the fact that women have multiple honorifics tied to their marital status versus men who only have Mr. But this bit baffles me for a number of reasons. One, the fact that MJ is being catty about it to another woman whom she has never spoken to yet. Two, the fact that she's pissy about her using Miss when it was Peter who called her that. Three, the assumption that using the term makes her more feminine. Four, that being more feminine is somehow a thing to be ridiculed. And five, despite this being a thing related to feminism of the 1970s, she's only doing it because she's jealous of Lois as a rival for Peter's affections. Peter Parker, the guy who just referred to you not as his girlfriend, but as a pal. Peter Parker, the guy who twice now has run off on you, one of which was the night before when he ditched you on your date. Peter Parker, who apparently ditched you a third time now because you had to go find him in order to be in this situation. No wonder writers wanted to get rid of the marriage if their perception of Mary Jane was as a jealous, judgmental jackass. But of course, Lois alleviates her concerns about being attracted to Peter since he's too young for her, and that she's only got eyes for big blue Boy Scouts. Speaking of, Superman flies down and shoots his heat vision at the two women, making them vanish. Superman is a dick! But of course something is up, since nearby Clark Kent just saw that and is confused as all hell. In a cute little reference, Peter asks Clark Kent where the phone booths are so he can change into his costume. It's funny how that image of Superman in a phone booth has endured, despite that not being a thing for a long time. Speaking of course there are no phone booths in the convention center, just stalls, so Peter has to go to the roof to change. He immediately encounters Superman as we enter into Chapter 2, When Heroes Clash. Far out! The 70s. Superman, thanks to J. Jonah Jameson's exquisite editorials about Spidey, isn't actually certain if he's a hero or not, so he assumes he's connected to the fake Superman attack. However, Spidey is of course blaming Superman for what went down. We soon pull back from the fight and see Luthor and Ock, with Luthor even in a Superman suit and a fake mask. We've got to assume that's a bodysuit too, otherwise Lex is buff. Of course, this is Superman we're talking about, so this fight should be as one-sided as Godzilla vs. Bambi, so the villains decide to give Spidey an edge in the fight, shooting radiation at him. You mean that red sun radiation device you prepared? Precisely. Though the radiation charge is purely temporary, it should stir things up rather nicely indeed.
Of course! Don't you know anything about science?
So yeah, since Spidey now has red sun radiation around his body, and yet is not lighting him up like a neon sign, and wait, if you have a gun that shoots red sun radiation, why don't you aim it at Superman? Spidey is able to punch Superman hard enough to knock him back. By this point, Soups has figured out that something's up, but Peter's been riled up all day and refuses to believe that Superman isn't involved, even though he privately thinks it's weird that he's able to hit him so hard. Finally, Soups is pissed off enough to try to punch back, but at the last moment he pulls his punch, realizing he's angry enough to kill. Fortunately, he doesn't have to, and just the wind blast from the punch is enough to send Spidey flying through the air. By the way, this fight should be taught at comic book schools, because it's damn spectacular. The pacing is excellent, the flow of the fight moves naturally, and every single impact that's supposed to have weight feels like everything just shook. It knows exactly when to use the splash pages and 2-page spreads to let the fight move and show off distance and power. I talked about this years ago in a Youngblood review, but it bears repeating. Bad fight scenes are where every panel is an over-the-top, exaggerated, huge impact, and it's boring as all hell. Hell, it's not just Liefeld that has this problem. Look back to Greg Land. Because his stuff is traced from single images, it's just a chaos of people making the punch or swing or kick. Here, though, you get the wind-up and then the swing. The build-up is what shows this stuff has weight, not just the impact. After that little air blast sent Spidey into a museum, he swings back over to Soups again. So Soups thought he was angry, huh? He hasn't seen angry till he's seen me angry. You wouldn't like a science major when he's angry. And boy, am I angry now! And of course, when Spider-Man is angry, he does cartwheels. But anyway, the red sun radiation wears off, so the impact just sends Spidey bouncing backwards. And thus we come to one of the more infamous lines of this book. How'd you get so hard so suddenly?
Are you sure it isn't time for a colorful metaphor?
And another punch. You have gotten harder! It is fascinating how, if you only heard the dialogue without looking at it, it's just a really rough gay porn sequence. After repeated punches to Superman's torso, Spidey finally gives up when his hands are in too much pain. The two talk and compare exposition, handling things properly with a handshake and the realization that they've been duped. And so we enter Chapter 3, The Call of Battle. Unfortunately, neither of them were by the phone, so the call went to voicemail. Superman has used his X-ray vision to track a strange energy signature from the convention center to an old railroad yard. After Spidey evades the death traps inside of the place, Superman just slams through a bunch of walls to get in. And it's really fascinating to me that this was their plan. Let Spidey be the guinea pig, while Superman just waits outside for a few minutes and then comes in. Maybe you should lead with the invulnerable guy first is all. Anyway, yeah, a hologram of Luthor and Ock reveals that MJ and Lois are alive and well, just trapped against a pillar, where MJ appears to still be lecturing Lois on how calling her Silver Age comic Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane is just demeaning because she knows she's really after Peter. The holograms are just there to say, "Mwah ha ha ha, we're working together, screw you guys," before disappearing. However, there is a bunch of computer equipment left behind, so Spidey figures he can access it to get more information. And the computer explodes. You see what happens when you don't follow Avery Brooks's advice?
That's gonna take some serious software.
Yeah, it was booby-trapped, and Superman manages to get Spidey away from the computer before the explosion killed him. Fortunately, Superman uses his super speed and photographic memory to reassemble the computer from the ground up without any such explosive traps. And he was able to make the hardware not be completely fried by the explosion thanks to his super no-I-don't-buy-it-for-a-second powers. Then again, Superman does hang out with the Tandy computer whiz kids. Maybe they showed him how to do that. Using the magically repaired computer, Spidey is able to track the hologram signal to Mount Kilimanjaro. Superman helps Spidey travel there via the web skis, because he's traveling along mountains instead of flying through the air? Huh? They come across a group of Maasai warriors. "My friend and I have come from the sky seeking two evil men. One is a man of many arms who..." "You're Superman, aren't you? I saw photos of you when I studied in London." "Superman has kind of racist assumptions." This entire section is just kind of weird, and I'm not sure why they felt the need to include it. After meeting with the tribe for a bit, they learn that a warrior ventured too close to an area of the mountain and vanished. And when they go to investigate, they find said warrior, who has been brainwashed and enhanced by Luthor so that he actually poses a threat to the two heroes. Superman realizes that the warrior's blade has been charged with red sun radiation too, so he comes up with a plan.
Spider-Man, you're webbing! When I fought you earlier, I analyzed it with my supervision. I believe I can change the chemical balance of your web with a dose of heat vision. I can change the chemical balance of it with my heat vision so that it's on fire! Wait.
No, he uses his heat vision to harden the webbing so that it's as strong as steel.
This makes no sense, and yet it's working.
With the tribesmen dealt with, we enter Chapter 4, Doomsday Decision. Oh great, in this version, Doomsday is going to be made up of the DNA of Luthor and Dr. Octopus. The two enter a high-tech control room, but the villains are nowhere to be found. Your pal Luthor goes in for gizmos in a big way, Soups. You ask me, he's seen too many James Bond movies. Well, he does kind of look like Blofeld.
Lex Luthor isn't the sort of man you joke about, Spidey. In everything he does, he's deadly serious. 40 cakes, Spider-Man! 40 cakes!
Discovering a rocket silo, they soon realize where the two have gone. Into space. They're on a rocket ship on their way to the abandoned orbital headquarters of the Injustice Gang, a supervillain team. And as we see on the rocket, they even had their own spiffy logo and everything. This is why branding is so important. After an interlude where Morgan Edge and J. Jonah Jameson get together to complain about Clark Kent and Peter Parker respectively, we see the launch of ComLab by NASA, where Luthor's plan comes to fruition. Using the stolen computer from the beginning, he takes control of ComLab and fires a laser into Earth's atmosphere, somehow generating a hurricane. Fortunately, Superman and Spider-Man are on their way, with Superman, of course, being able to travel through space without a spacesuit because shut up, while Spidey is piloting another spacecraft. Also shut up.
Spider-Man seems to be handling that borrowed space shuttle model fairly well.
I'm guessing that's just another Injustice Gang shuttle, since the alternative is that NASA secretly has easy-to-deploy green shuttlecrafts available already. Then again, considering they apparently put a satellite in orbit that can create hurricanes, maybe I shouldn't be that surprised that NASA is keeping secrets. Our heroes try to intercept the laser, but both are knocked out and brought aboard the satellite.
Surprised, Kryptonian? Don't be. I used ultra-frequency sonics in that laser probe.
Ultra-frequency sonics in a laser probe in space. I don't have any clips left to describe how you clearly don't understand how any of those things work. Luthor explains his plan. He's gonna threaten the US government with expanding the hurricane's power and destroying even the world if he's not given $10 billion. Pretty simple and effective plan, really, though I'm not exactly certain where he intends to spend that money. I mean, the problem with supervillain plans like this are that they assume that they'll be able to walk into a mall or something afterwards and go on a shopping spree. Or maybe he'll just order stuff off of Amazon, I don't know. In any event, our heroes leap into action, with Spidey taking on Luthor and Superman Doc Ock. Unfortunately, Luthor also controls the gravity on board the satellite, decreasing it significantly. The villains apparently have experience fighting like this, but our heroes do not, and Superman is apparently still dazed from the laser, so the villains easily repel them. Superman comes up with their counter strategy, letting the opponents make the first move, and then using their momentum against them. Not that it makes a difference though, since Spidey soon points out that the hurricane Luthor started is already growing out of control, and Luthor does not give a crap.
And what began as a simple blackmail plan will end in the glorious destruction of a planet which held my genius in contempt.
Considering you're using your genius to destroy the planet, you haven't exactly offered a reason why they shouldn't hold it in contempt. While Superman goes off to deal with things himself, Spidey points out to Doc Ock how insane this is. He's gonna destroy the Earth! Where are you gonna spend your loot then, friend?
Well, technically, if Luthor destroys the world, he's not gonna get any loot anyway, so no problem there.
Doc Ock, of course, intervenes and smashes the controls, breaking off the laser's actions. However, the damage has been done and a huge tidal wave is headed for the Atlantic coast. But of course, that's where Superman comes in, accelerating himself to Mach 3 and repeatedly flying in front of the tidal wave,
creating a cresting wall of sound. Phil Spector, savior of Earth.
He's successful and the wave subsides.
And then, of a sudden, there is peace.
And there will be peace. There will be peace when the people of the world want it so badly.
Well, I guess we wanted peace bad enough this time. Afterwards, Doc Ock and Luthor have been webbed up, and our heroes discuss whether it was luck or fate that brought them together. And they end with a hearty bro handshake a la Predator.
You son of a bitch.
And so our comic ends with our heroes in their civilian identities, as both have conveniently gotten footage and photos of the Superman and Spider-Man battle that schmoozes things up with their respective bosses. The two walk off into the night with their girlfriends in tow, who are none the worse for wear despite having been chained up in space for most of the story. This comic is a classic, and pretty damn good. It is not without its flaws, of course. The Maasai Warriors inclusion feels more than a little iffy, and ultimately contributed nothing to the story that couldn't have just instead involved another robot. Hell, you could have cut out all of that and extended the title fight a little longer. Don't get me wrong, the fight is fantastic and probably only lasts as long as it needs to, but since this is a 90-page book, maybe the title fight should not last less than a fifth of the total length of the story. Hell, it's not even half the length of the prologues. Dr. Octopus feels kind of like an afterthought when Luthor is the brains behind everything, including their escape. Hell, Spidey himself seems to have the short end of the stick here. He's presented as a hothead and less necessary than Superman. Sure, we see how skilled he is, but it's Superman who fixes most of the problems in the story just by having an awesome array of powers. Spidey does stuff, but it just doesn't feel quite like Spidey is on his A-game here next to someone as powerful as Superman. Still, that's a minor complaint in the grand scheme of things. It's still a very enjoyable book with a great throwdown between the two heroes before they join up and save the day. Good stuff. Next time, we are not in for good stuff. For the next 3 weeks, it's graduation day.
Ah, ladies, I'm pleased you're still well. I hope you enjoyed your little trip. Teleportation can sometimes be somewhat unsettling, I know.
If you can teleport, why did you take the shuttle up?